Around 42% of people are actively trying to lose weight. That's not past tense, that's right now, currently. So what defines success when dieting? Stick around, we'll find out. And what I'm also going to do, I'm going to throw in some tips on how you can actually produce a successful meal plan for yourself. Welcome to Impact Your Evolution with me, Coach Andy James, and it's our goal to help you turn your health from an option into a priority. So why are meal plans so popular when it comes down to producing results inside of the fitness industry? We're going to quickly touch on some topics inside of all of these areas that's going to give you a better understanding as to what to expect by going down the meal plan route, and maybe take a suggestion from me with regards to what flexible dieting looks like. So meal plans in themselves, they work, don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing meal plans at all. I used to be a prescriber of them myself. But what I did find that it tends to restrict a person's life so much beyond the point that they don't know what to do when they come off using the diet plan, the meal plan. So it doesn't really give a person enough education around how to manage day-to-day foods. You can restrict somebody's lifestyle so much that following a meal plan is very successful to produce a result. But what do I do when I find myself in a social environment, or I just can't sustain eating a meal plan for any longer than 12 weeks? Do you keep yo-yoing in and out of using meal plans? Because that's not a successful way of dieting. That's just any other approach that you've taken in the past that isn't allowing you to sustain the result. So 65% of people will regain a minimum of 5 pounds at the end of using a meal plan. It's because there is a lack of education that's involved in how to sustain food long term, how to sustain a diet long term. But this is where the whole army of flexible dieters they chime in and go, well, flexible dieting, all food should be on the table. It's about moderation. It's about how you manage food. It is. But on the other element, most people don't have the discipline to sustain being in a flexible diet because temptation is too rewarding. People like to have those things that they feel like they shouldn't be eating or consuming because it's that release of stress through the week. It's about being in that social environment with family or having a drink with your partner on a Friday night. All of those scenarios are real world scenarios. And you'll have people in different corners, fighting different perspectives on this. You'll have the people that can say, yes, I can stick to a diet plan long term. Yes, I can eat out of Tupperware because that's my lifestyle. Yes, I like chicken, broccoli, and rice. Well, round of applause. I applaud you for it. If you can sustain that long term, awesome. It doesn't mean that everybody should have your opinion and your approach on how you get your results, because most people can't sustain that. And I've been one of these individuals. Like I said, I'm going to open some doors that I've maybe not spoken about, or I've not spoken about for a while, with regards to all of the different types of things that I've tried in the past. So in my earlier years, let's say, I'm going through my 20s, I made all of the mistakes that everybody else makes when trying to produce a fitness result. Now, yes, in my late 20s, early 30s, I got to a point where I was living this typical bodybuilder type lifestyle where training 5-6 days a week, I was living out of Tupperware, all of my food was measured out, my macros were absolutely to the gram, my calories were never exceeded. I lived this bodybuilder type lifestyle, and I would turn up to parties with Tupperware pre-made to go in a microwave whilst everybody else was sat there ordering takeaway and having wine, and I was that person sat there eating out of a Tupperware, just trying to mind my own business, trying to convince myself that I'm healthy, I'm doing the good things and I was miserable. I'm not going to lie. I was absolutely flat out miserable seeing everybody else around me enjoy themselves in a way that I just felt like I couldn't. And was that because I didn't know how to? Partly, yes. I didn't know how to manage a social environment being in a restrictive program like a meal plan. My meals were set. Just like you would receive from a coach that does prescribe meal plans, you might have a breakfast, lunch, dinner, 2 to 3 snacks throughout the day. They'll probably have you eating 5 to 6 times in general. These different types of food spread out at different points in the day. They might even have certain protocols around what to eat around training windows. Now, all of this is fine if that is the type of lifestyle long term that you intend to live. But most people will go into a coaching phase or go into a program and think, I'm going to do this for X amount of time. I will produce this result by doing this at X point of time. So if I eat this food and do this for this amount of time, I will get to this result. And that's kind of the motivation for a lot of people to keep doing the boring, monotonous, day in, day out, boring foods, a non-sustainable lifestyle, as I like to refer to it. They will do these things for a period of time where it kind of, the reward comes from seeing the scale move, feeling the clothes change, feeling the physique change a little bit. And this is the motivating factor for them. But they get to the end of that point. They get to the end of the 12 weeks. They lose the 5, 10, 20 pounds that they lose. And now all of a sudden, they find themselves back in the real world. That meal plan worked to get them there. But this is where the 65% of people fall off and regain at least 5 pounds of what it was that they lost, because they can't navigate day-to-day life very well. They don't know what it's like to walk into Costco's and get one of those giant slices of pizza, or be down at the local pub with family and friends and everybody else is grabbing a pint and you're sat there with soda and lime. Now, hands up, I am a soda and lime kind of person, but I'm just not a drinker myself. But that's a personal choice. But if I was, I wouldn't want to feel like I was having to miss a social environment because I felt like I couldn't contribute because my lifestyle isn't adaptable to everybody else's. I don't want to feel like I'm missing out on moments. And I feel like as an individual, gone through my 30s, now into my 40s, I think a lot of people start to think very early on that a certain way of living is about producing that level of result. It's about looking lean. I was walking around at 6-7% body fat when I was living out of Tupperware, doing this whole bodybuilder lifestyle thing. And I felt like I was walking around with a badge of honor. You know, I can do this and most people couldn't. And it was kind of an ego thing. And I wasn't an egotistical person. I wasn't very self-aware. And I started to get up to my late 20s, early 30s. And that's when the real life things start to happen. You know, like as the responsibilities of the world start to really kick in. And you find yourself in scenarios that doesn't allow you to be a fixed dieter type approach. You can't really sustain long-term this whole following the structured meal plan and following the strict macros and following the set foods that are laid out for breakfast, lunch, and dinners. It just doesn't become long-term sustainable. And for a lot of people, that's the big problem. And that's the hurdle that most people don't get the information around to be able to help themselves long-term. You shouldn't feel like you're tied to a program or a person or a coach just because you can't sustain food long-term, only because you didn't have the education given to you. I want to give you some education. So, why do meal plans work short-term, not long-term? Sustainability. It's as easy as that. Long-term, they're not very sustainable. Short-term, they're fantastic if you're prepared to sacrifice. Now, on the flip side, flexible dieting. All food is on the table, but the caveat there is, are you disciplined enough to know when enough is enough? And are you disciplined to know when I'm exceeding what I shouldn't really be doing? Because if all foods are on the table, you've got temptation to fight with now. Now, that's why meal plans might seem tempting for you, because they're removing that temptation. Oh, I've got to eat the boring food to get some of the result. I'll keep doing this until I see the result. I see the result. Now what do I do? How do I manage life? I have no idea because I've not been in this situation with this result before. I'm now lacking information. So get your pen and paper out. Pause right now. Take some mental notes. These are some things that you need to consider. Calories and macros, they are not specific to an individual. If I was to say to Joe Bloggs that walks through the door, you need 2,000 calories, 200 grams of protein, X, Y, Z. And then I said to, I'll use a typical, sorry, any Karens out there, this isn't a bash at any Karens. It's just, I spoke to a Karen and I know very well actually, before I did this podcast. Karen, you need 1,600 calories and 130 grams of protein, and this is it, and this will get you to your result. Now, Joe walks through the door and Karen walks through the door, and I've prescribed these calories and macros. They feel like that they are specific to that individual, and they're actually not. What they are is a guideline to start from. So your calories and your macros are a baseline to start from to decide what actions do I need to take to progress me moving forwards. They are not set in stone that they should never be readjusted. So eliminate that from thought straight away. Calories and macros are as adaptable as anything else. So how do you work out what you physically need to begin with? It's a guideline. It's not set in stone. So you can use any of these calorie calculators that will give you your calories and your macro profile for how active you are, what stage in life you're at, etc., etc., etc. and it will give you a number and some grams of proteins, fats, and carbs to follow. Now, you can adjust these at any point. Don't ever feel like you can't. If you feel like they're too low because you're a ridiculously active person and you train intensely when you're in the gym, maybe you do actually need more calories than what the calorie calculator is giving you. That's not a bad thing. But maybe you're not actually moving as much as what you anticipated when you did the calorie calculator, and you may need to reduce those calories a little bit. Again, that's fine. If you work on a flat line principle of 30% protein, 40% carbohydrates, and 30% fats, you've got a good baseline and you're covering all of the areas. So calories, an easy way, and this is a very easy way. This is how I personally tend to monitor mine. Now, again, like I say, they're a guideline. So I take my body weight in pounds and just multiply it by 10. So whatever pounds I am at that point in time, I'll multiply it by 10. And that usually puts me into a very slight calorie deficit. So say if I'm 220 pounds at present in body weight, 2,200 calories, very slight deficit. That would be me training at the volume that I'm currently training, nothing changes, and I'm in a slight deficit. Now, if I wanted to see that deficit increase, I personally would increase my output. I don't want to increase my calorie intake because 2,200 calories, it's a little bit low, but I can live on that for sure. I'm not a massive eater around midday. I work long hours. I tend to eat majority of my food first thing after training and also in the evenings. So I kind of like to split my calories up in that way. I don't need a meal plan to tell me what I need to eat. All I really need to do is consume set volume of food in a day for a period of time, 1 to 2 weeks. These are the numbers that need to be taken down. So calories. Calorie calculator, they're just a guideline. Don't be afraid to adjust them. Macro split profile. You can look at a 30, 40, 30. 30 protein, 40 carbohydrates, 30 fats. The next one is you don't need set meal times. So long as you're consuming that volume of food within the day, you're perfectly fine. And how long before you make any adjustments? Give yourself 1 to 2 weeks, bare minimum, before you make any calorie adjustments or calorie expenditure adjustments. So your intake and your expenditure, don't mess with those for around about 2 weeks. Until you get some feedback from what you've adjusted, don't go changing things. So all of those things in themselves will help you structure how you manage your food. Now, what foods should you be eating? This is really the tricky one. This is the individual at themselves, because I like to eat a certain way and you like to eat a certain way. I prefer first thing in the morning to be fueled on protein and fats. So I generally tend to have just scrambled egg for my breakfast. I've introduced carbs in the past and it makes me lethargic first thing in the morning. I find that my energy dips because I've had too high carbohydrates come in too early in the day. So I feel a bit tired first thing. And that's even after I've trained. So I don't tend to have too many carbohydrates first in the morning. Now, late morning, sort of midday, that's when I reintroduce carbohydrates. So I might have something just before lunch, say, maybe an hour or two before lunch. That's only going to be a snack, probably carbohydrate based. I split the food up in how I physically feel I respond best to my day. There is no set way of doing X, Y, or Z. There's no set way of this has to be this way for X, Y, Z result. You can find out by adjusting small things at different times of the day that work best for you. Some people respond great to carbohydrates first thing in the morning. Other people don't. There is no right and wrong. You have to be open-minded enough to say, I'm going to try this and see how it works. Give yourself a couple of weeks. If you find yourself more tired, maybe getting too many carbs. If you find yourself too tired early in the day, maybe you need to increase your proteins and your fats. Again, nutrition is very responsive to how the body and the brain works. So no one person is exactly the same as anybody else when it comes down to this. You might come under a blanket number of percentage of people, but you're talking vast number of people. So just have a look at how your day's set up. Do you train first thing in the morning? You're probably going to want more carbohydrates earlier in your day if you do. If you train late in the day, you might find that you're better with carbohydrates from midday onwards. Again, don't feel like you need to restrict yourself to get to the result. The fundamentals are knowing what you need to consume number-wise, calorie-wise, knowing how you're expending that. So what are you actually expending? How do I split those numbers up? Proteins, fats, and carbs. If you just don't want to work those numbers out, just look at it as balanced. If you can split that plate up into 3/3 and go, here's a third of protein, here's a third of carbohydrates, here's a third maybe on fats, you should be all right. You should be all right in the sense of total number of volume, because your fats will look smaller on the plate because fats consume a lot more calories. Your proteins and your carbohydrates, most protein looks like it's not a lot and carbohydrates looks like it is a lot, but generally in speaking, they should be about the same anyway on the meal. If you don't want to measure them out, don't measure them out. Just look at the packet and roughly work the numbers out. It's not a big thing when it comes to nutrition. Most food that's on the table, you just need to have a responsible, and this is the big key. This is the takeaway that I want you to actually take away is it's your responsibility as an individual, as an adult, to be able to say, am I really overdoing it? Am I actually owning this process, or am I trying to abuse the system? Because if I'm being mindful of the calories that I'm consuming, the calories that I'm expending, how I'm splitting that food up throughout the day, how my body feels when I'm consuming certain types of foods, you might find that you consume like refined sugar, so say chocolate, and you crash your energy. But you might find that when you eat fruit, which is fructose, so fruit, sugar-based fruit, your actually energy is a lot higher. All of those different types of scenarios, they play out in how you physically feel throughout the day. So just listen to what your body's trying to tell you, because it's giving you clues and signs constantly how you should be thinking and feeling about food choices that you're making throughout the day. And nutrition needs to be no more complicated than that. It really doesn't. It should be consistent enough throughout your week so you know exactly what you're doing with it. You should be able to think a few days ahead and say, well, I'm actually want to have this meal on Friday night. That meal might be quite heavy in calories. Perfectly fine. You can make your adjustments through the week to compensate for it. You can work your weekly average where if you're on 2,000 calories a day and you're going out on the weekend, just reduce your calories throughout the week and bank some of those calories towards the weekend, and they can go towards the meal that you're going to have. That over the week, total average of calories consumed is still the same. But you've adjusted the way that you're living to be able to compensate for how you're going to manage your food at a social event. Again, not restrictive. You still got all of the variety in life. You get to live the way that you want to live and also work towards that result that you're working towards. Food does not have to be restrictive. Yes, meal plans do work. Meal plans are not the answer, though, to you producing long-term sustainable results. The best way you can get to that is understanding food as a whole, experimenting with it, being honest with yourself. There is no harm if you do gain 1 or 2 pounds. It's not the end of the world whilst you're in an experimental phase. You can just reduce the calories again, get back to what you were doing, and see the weight decrease. Then you make your adjustments, try again, and you find the things that work for you long term. You keep trying them, and when you find something that works, make it stick. It's as simple as that. Build a toolbox of all these different approaches you have with nutrition, and you'll find yourself never restricted for dieting ever again. You'll never need another meal plan, and you'll have all of the options on the table, and you'll be able to live life on your terms. So hopefully you can take something away from this. There's been a bit of information in this one. Why meal plans are successful? Yes. Are they long-term sustainable? No. Is flexible dieting the answer? Maybe. That's down to you to decide, and that's down for you to try. But the only thing you can do is try, because if you don't, what have you got to really go on? You've got no evidence base to say that it does work or doesn't work for you. If you're fearful of how you make decisions, get to know how you make decisions first as an individual. Then go and feel like you've gained the confidence to be able to go and adapt to the diet protocols in front of you. Hope this one's helped. If it has, leave some feedback, share it with somebody that you know. In fact, if you do know somebody that is struggling with dieting or doesn't really know how to put things together, this might be the perfect podcast for you to share with them. So just grab episode 142, send them the link for it, and just have them have a listen to give them a better understanding as to why a set meal plan might not work for them, and why flexible dieting might, and what they should be considering when they're setting that up. Have an awesome day. I'll speak to you in the next one. Take care.